I would simply add that it's deep as usual, and you're going to get to a point where all the receivers kind of look and feel the same, where the difference between can we quantify it on the fly? Maybe we can. I've got a group of, like, my 24th receiver is Terry McLaurin. He's never been much higher than 13 PPR points per game. Drake London's behind him. Christian Kirk's behind him. Go all the way down to guys like Jordan Addison, Gabe Davis, John Dotson. Would it surprise you if those guys were around 12 PPR points per game? Probably not. And there's a difference of like 12 spots among my wide receiver positions, and those guys are going over 20 picks later than McLaurin, London, Kirk.
I think it's really worth pointing out that compared to running back, wide receiver has not been as top heavy. And I say that even with having said what I started the show with, that the top 7 in points per game were, among the first 8 drafted. But you also, then you had Amon-Ra St. Brown, you had Devontae Smith in there. Last year, or 2021, Cooper Kupp was a 4th round pick, and he was the most valuable player in fantasy. Deebo Samuel and Jamar Chase were top 5 wide receivers, and they were round 7 and 8 picks. The year before that, Chris Godwin, or maybe that was 2019, whatever it was, Chris Godwin was wide receiver 2. He was a mid-round pick. DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley were 4th round picks and finished top 5. There's more of that at wide receiver than there is at running back. And in fact, there have been a lot of really, really good picks in rounds 7 through 9 the last 2 seasons. I mean, like I said, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase in 2021. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, made that cut last year. Devontae Smith was, I think I might be forgetting someone. Christian Kirk. So I do think that's important to note, that there's more shakeup in terms of ADP and finish, less top heavy at wide receiver.
Except for last year.
Running back. Last year in the top 6 was very top heavy, but top 12 was a lot of guys that were drafted a lot later. Like I said, Devontae Smith and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Christian Kirk finished top 12 overall, not per game. Jalen Waddle was terrific, and he was kind of like a 4 or 5 turn pick. So, Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper was a top 12 guy. He was a later pick. So yeah, last year was top 6 was very, very stud heavy. But after that, it was great values, great bargains. And that we see that a lot at wide receiver. So I don't know what that means. I mean, I think that means you need to take some shots in the mid to late rounds at wide receiver. Don't fill up too fast, I guess.
I don't. But that's the thing.
That speaks to where these guys are now being drafted. They're getting pushed up. It's why we're seeing this. It's the dead zone conversation that we're having that's different now, because these running back values that are falling to these later spots of guys that would typically be ranked in the top 20 that we would be taking in the rounds 2, 3, and 4 range are now going in the rounds 5, 6, and 7 range. So it's pushing up all these wide receivers. So I think that's kind of where, if you're planning out a strategy, it's lean receiver early and buy into those running backs in the middle group, with maybe the idea of taking a hero RB approach. Take one of those guys and then get receiver heavy and then go back to the running backs again.
I don't really agree with the idea of don't fill up too early. Like you don't have to just draft your starters in order of when you draft your starters. If you can start 4 wide receivers in a PPR league, you can draft 5 wide receivers before you draft 1 running back.
Agreed.
Okay. What if it's a 2 receiver league with a flex?
Then you could draft 4 wide receivers.
4 instead of 5.
Okay. Do you worry that you get to a point where you need help at running back, you need help at tight end, you need help, you haven't drafted your quarterback yet, or maybe you haven't drafted one of your quarterback or your tight end, and now you're in round 7 or 8, and I just told you that we actually have, look, we have a lot of busts in round 7 and 8 at wide receiver, or probably at running back too. It's round 7 and 8 for a reason, right? Tight end is pretty bad there sometimes too. So I'm not going to say every wide receiver that goes there is good. I am going to say, though, that we have had some absolute superstars, some studs come out of that range each of the last 2 seasons. Do you worry about really not being able to draft a wide receiver at that point, because you have to fill your other positions?
I think the worst thing you can do at quarterback or tight end is get to round 7 or 8 and think, oh, no, I don't have one. I have to take one now. It goes completely against great or late.
All right, moving on. I guess we'll stick with strategy here. In 10-team leagues, in 12-team, in 14-team leagues, in 3 receiver leagues. Does anything change dramatically for you guys with the way you approach wide receiver?
No.
I hesitate a little bit to say nothing changes in a 14-team league that starts 3 wide receivers. I think you have to prioritize that just a little bit more because the depth kind of goes away a little bit. You almost have to prioritize going running back receiver with your first 2 picks. It's a little bit tougher to pass on a positional need and take the value in that type of specific format.
Yeah, I'm more balanced in 14 team probably. And in 10 team, I'll push those elite QBs and tight ends up a little bit higher because elite players, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, if you have any pick in a 10-team league, you should feel good about if you don't take a wide receiver with either of your first 2 picks, you're going to get one of Olave, Smith, or Higgins in round 3. I mean, they're not all going to go in the top 30. And in fact, if you wanted to double up on them in rounds 3 and 4, you could easily do that in a 10-team league.
You might see them in round 4.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, how about non-PPR versus half PPR versus full PPR? Anything change dramatically there?
Yep. I'm almost certainly taking a running back in round 1, especially if I have a top 8 pick in non-PPR. All those great catches that these stud receivers get, those mean nothing now. Half PPR, I'll still take wide receivers. I'm still going to get a decent edge there. But in non-PPR, man, running backs get pushed up.
And in non-PPR, like Pickens and Gabe Davis and those types of guys are more valuable.
Right.
Correct.
Low volume, high yards per catch, high ADOT, high touchdown rate.
That's the only thing, really.
That's it.
I got to ask Jamie, because you said at the top of the show that you were getting more excited about Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have him 6th, I think you said?
Yes.
What about a non-PPR?
He drops behind A.J. Brown, and I think that's it.
Okay.
He drops behind Waddle for me.
I just want everyone to know Justin Jefferson last year would have been RB7 per game in non-PPR, which is an unbelievable stat. He wasn't the best wide receiver per game, by the way. That was Cooper Kupp. But
Well,
go ahead.
Well, no, we have our draft on Tuesday night, for people that still play non-PPR, and you are certainly very adamant and angry at Dan and Joe Pisapia of Fantasy Pros because with 2 of the first 4 picks, Dan started the draft with Justin Jefferson, and Joe took Jamar Chase at 4, which left me with McCaffrey at 2, and then Bijan Robinson went 3 ahead of Eckler, who went 5. So that was a little surprising, but Dan's counter to that was you kept saying you're not going to get a good running back, and he ended up with Joe Mixon, depending on how you feel about that. But he still was able to get a guy that has top 10 upside by going with Justin Jefferson. So I think it's just a matter of personal preference, but I don't think we would advise taking Jefferson. I don't want to speak for anybody, but taking Jefferson first overall in non-PPR, simply because the difference without the catch, is a little bit glaring at the top of that draft.
You mentioned that Justin Jefferson was 7th among running backs in non-PPR. I think it's worth saying, where did Amon-Ra St. Brown finish?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to guess.
You want to take a guess? I got it right here.
15.
No, 23rd. He was behind Alvin Kamara, Damian Pierce. This is on a per game basis. Najee Harris, 10.1 non-PPR points per game. Those catches mean a lot